So, this is a short introduction about what is ECS, that is Elastic Container Service. Now, what happened is, I will give you a very short intro about how it to work using some analogy. So, our analogy should start from here. First of all, as you know, there are some kind of tasks, okay? So, some kind of commands you can say, and you have to give those commands. Okay, you have to write those commands in the file, and you have to follow some process. We call it as a build, and finally whatever you get is a actually task list, but in our language we call it as an image. It is nothing but the task list. What happen is, you have to save this image to some storage or a kind of library of image, and we call it as a repository. Now once you store it in the repository, it means we actually push. Okay, now it is stored somewhere. So here we are pushing it in a Docker repository. It is either Docker repository or it is a ECS repository, because if we are working with AWS, it is called as ECR ECS repository, or it may be Docker repository. And after push operation, all your images get saved in the repository, and if you want to pull it, you can pull it, and with the help of image we can create the containers. What I have to do now is, let's say I have to retrieve it, and I have to retrieve it in some container. So this is container. Okay, that image is actually retrieved. This is the image which is retrieved. Let's say this is image I1, this is image I2. Image retrieval is nothing but a pull operation. From I1 container 1 is created, from I2 container 2 is created, and actually these containers are created where? So at some EC2 server these containers are created. Okay, and this EC2 is, let's say, worker 1, this EC2 is, let's say, worker 2, and these are actually part of our ECS system. So ECS system means here we are referring to ECS cluster, and that cluster contains master node, that cluster contains some worker nodes. So ECS is nothing but a ECS cluster here. And one thing is there, that if we are using EC2 launch type, their infrastructure of EC2 is managed by us. If we are using Fargate, that is serverless type, then infrastructure is managed by AWS. So who will manage infrastructure? Based on that, the launch type is created, and in most of the cases EC2 is used as a launch type, where EC2 is under our control. But if we don't want to use our control, we can use serverless Fargate, and thus wherever AWS want, it will run the service. You will that EC2 will be not visible to you in case of Fargate. In case of EC2 launch, as shown here, EC2 is available to you. You can configure it, you can manage it. ECS contain some master nodes and some worker node. Now, along with that, one thing you have to always keep in mind, that these EC2s, okay, they have, let's say this is a EC2, so they have a agent running inside it. Okay, and that agent actually receive this task. Okay, this task, and they execute it. Okay, so this is the agent which execute the task. Okay, here one more thing is, when we say tasks are created based on the task, based on the resource availability. Tasks are allocated to EC2. This is called as manual scheduling, where in case of dynamic scheduling, AWS decide how to allocate the task to various instances of EC2. Because in Fargate, which is a serverless, AWS have full control of task allocation. So there are two type of schedulings. One is the manual scheduling, where we manually schedule task, allocate task based on the resource availability. In dynamic scheduling, dynamically the tasks are allocated. Now this task have a role assigned to it. Let's say task have a role R1. Okay, and similarly other tasks have role R2, and with the help of this role, okay, the API calls are made. Those API calls are made to various AWS services. It may be sending log to CloudWatch. It may be pulling some Docker image from ECS. It may be uh, fetching some sensitive data using secret manager. It may be any kind of task. So it's actually a role which is useful to call API, and here role represent some entity of AWS is calling to some other entity of AWS. So that's why role is needed. So I start with command list, then I get to build, then I created an image, then I push it in a repository, then container is created from the image, and then this image is actually uh, executed by this kind of agent here, and it have a role. Okay, and does it made the API call. This is how the ECS system work, which is actually a Docker system, but in AWS we call it as the ECS system because the name of repository is ECS repository. So this is a short introduction of how ECS work, Elastic Container Service. In next video we can learn more about each of the operations as shown here. Thank you.